Go to line number 1 and say hello to the leader of the NDP here in Newfoundland and Labrador, also the member for Signal Hill, Kitty Miss Lorraine Michael. Hello, Miss Michael, you're on the air.
Hello, Patty. How are you this afternoon?
I'm fine, thank you very much. How are you?
I'm great, thanks.
Grand. And so the house is open. My God, let the shenanigans begin.
Well, we're back in there, and it's good to be back, though, I have to say, because it is frustrating when you are an MHA and government is doing things and you can't question them in the House about what they're doing. It does get frustrating, so it's great to be back.
Absolutely it is. And on the top of the agenda today, with no speech from the throne or what have you, it's right down to business of the people. What have we seen so far other than ministers' statements, whatever it is that they make? Well,
we do have some legislation that was left from the fall that we haven't gotten to today. Today, the first one was Animal Protection Act, and there have been a lot of people waiting for this Animal Protection Act, and I know that George Murphy was speaking to it a short while ago, so it's something that's dear to his heart. So we're glad to see that happening. Of course, is going to be the money bills, because really it is the budget time, and we'll have what's called the interim supply bill, because where we have no idea when the budget is coming down and the premium's not giving indication. Once March 31st comes, if we don't pass an interim supply bill, we can't spend money. So it's that will happen, and during that time we'll be able to raise a lot of the issues that are disturbing people right now with regard to the cuts that are going on. The government, unfortunately, is doing a lot of things, making decisions and talking about the budget, but we don't have the budget, and we're not going to have it for a while, which is a bit frustrating. It's more than a bit. It's rather frustrating, actually.
Yeah, the job cuts are, of course, desperate news for the families, the people that will be affected and their family. We know that some of this is going to take place. I see you and others speaking out about it, and of course it's just easy fodder and important material to speak to. But what do we do? I mean, what do we do if there's got to be some cuts made? What is the issue in particular? Because if you got to cut, you got to cut.
The concern for me is government is making the decisions. We don't have any of the information that they're basing their decisions on. That becomes a problem.
That's arbitrary, though, right?
Yes. What I'm concerned about is that they seem to be doing across-the-board cuts without analysis, and that to me is very problematic. So, for example, with the employment assistance services, maybe there are some of those that were duplications. Maybe there were, and I know of some that weren't duplications. So doing an across-the-board shutting down of all of those services which are community-based, to me, is very problematic. And this is what I'm seeing happening, this across-the-board decision-making. And without an analysis, without explaining to us why all of them should shut down. I had, for example, in my own district, I have at least one of the community centers that's being shut down. And, there are 200 people that the Virginia Park Community Center serves in a year. And it's important for people to understand that when you have somebody in your community center who is an employment counselor, people feel very comfortable going into that community center setting and speaking with the employment counselor and getting advice with regard to further training for yourself, where you find the areas that you can go to find out the information about the further training.
Yeah.
It's the community-based service is something that an awful lot of people need who feel intimidated by the bureaucracy.
I'd like to see some numbers from those offices as to how many people came in the door, how many got a job, and what sort of value would be nice to know on that front too.
And they do. They all keep that. There's actually a computerized accounting system. They know what happens to every single individual. Government has access to that information as well. I mean, in the bigger systems, not just there in the community center, for example. And the story I've just told about my community, the community center in my district, all of the MHAs in our caucus can speak about that. Then I met with, for example, I was in Labrador all this week. I came back this morning and met with people from the southeast coast of Labrador, very upset over the closure of their four. And they told me stories, for example, not a story, I mean a reality, that last week they had 3 people who had been served by one of their centers dissenters who had become lawyers, who had started out walking into their community-based office and saying, I don't know where I'm going, I'm unemployed, etc., who are now lawyers. And they can track all kinds of people like that on the Southeast Coast. And the Southeast Coast, you can't convince me that they were duplicating services down there.
No, and maybe not. Sometimes it's hard to put yourself in the position of those that require a certain service. Like if I didn't need it or use it in the past, I have to do my best to understand what is required. And that's like you for things that you're not personally exposed to. So that's why I asked the questions, just to get answers. And I'm glad you offered that much. I have seen some numbers come out, and you can agree or disagree here. Some of them are pretty underwhelming. They're pretty underwhelming results, some of these offices, and the numbers have gone in and the numbers of people that got a job that was somehow different in a different region, something they didn't already know was there, seasonal work that is omnipresent. So I think there's some legitimate questions here where politics goes away and we discuss how we do these things and the legitimacy of the spend, because I think some of the numbers I've seen are a little bit underwhelming.
But and that's my whole point. Maybe there's some places that is legitimate to close them down, but you can't make that decision for all, and that's why I'm concerned that is just an across-the-board blanket decision that all EAS offices are closed and all EAS programs are closed.
And that's a fair comment. One thing I will ask you, Ms. Michael, while I have you here, is because I follow you on Twitter, I think you follow me too, and I don't chime in with the politicians on Twitter. I find it's just a bit of a, this is a much more valuable medium. No. When you're making statements like, okay, if someone is couch surfing, are you a half person?
Right.
And the distinction between the so-called mixed message of economic growth versus government deficit, is there ever an opportunity in this world outside of utopia where we would have people who are not facing that position in life? And what does the have province status have to do with that anyway? Because have is an equalization issue as opposed to efficiency of program and spending in the right manner if you're the government.
Well, you've got two questions. The equalization program, but have is based on the fact that if a province gets to a certain point with regard to revenue income, the equalization program, or what's the word I want? Equalization formula, indicates that a province at a certain point has developed its ability to raise more revenue through taxation and other forms. And the province now has a responsibility to plan fiscally based on the revenue that it has and its ability to raise more revenue through the taxation system. And so to me it means, and building on what I've just said, that means that a province then has a responsibility to do its planning based on that reality. There's no sense fighting it because it's there. So you build on that reality. If we have the great economy that we have, then we've got to be able to make sure that economy is working for the people. And not, it's one thing to say we have the gross domestic product and we're growing and growing and growing, but if we're not using that ability to mean that life is better for people, then there's something wrong. Last week I was at an event where the Minister of Natural Resources, current Minister of Natural Resources, Mr. Marshall, who had been the Minister of Finance, was going on and on about how wonderful everything is. And he said, some are even daring to say we're in our Camelot. Yeah. Well, it's not a Camelot for some people that I've met during this past week in Labrador. It's not a Camelot for some people in my district. So we have a responsibility to use the benefits in the economy to make sure it's working for everybody. There's always going to be somebody who's going to fall between the cracks. We know that.
That's true.
But the system has to work. And we have to make sure the system is working.
And that no truer words have ever been spoken. And, it's not always a matter of just money. It's not just line item stuff. It's how you're spending the money. That's the trick for good governance and for fiscal prudence. Ms. Michael, I have to go to my break, but next time, as we've discussed in the past, identifying opportunities to save and to reduce the deficit here is the trick, is the solution required. It's not just public service cuts that won't even dent $1.6 billion. We need to know what all parties think about. Here is where we can do it. So I'll prep you for that, and next week I'll reach out to you, and hopefully we can have a conversation and focus on that alone.
Well, thank you so much, Patty. Good talking to you.
My pleasure.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye.